I came across Barry from a random YouTube short of a scene from season 4, the assassination attempt in the prison. It looked interesting enough, like a dark comedy, and I hadn't seen a good one since Dexter. Still haven't. So I decided to give it a watch, and despite wanting to drop it at several points, I did actually finish the show. Worst ending ever, by the way, but we'll get to that. And yes, this video will contain spoilers. The first episode of Barry was honestly great, and is the only reason I committed to watching the entire show. The monologue scene where Barry opens up about his life and how he became a hitman hit all the right emotional notes and got me invested in the character. Unfortunately, that wouldn't last long as Barry kept changing in unforeseen ways throughout the show, but more on that in a bit. Barry has its comedy, some moments that actually made me laugh pretty hard, like the Ronnie fight scene and a couple of the Hank scenes, but a lot of the jokes didn't land for me, the dialogue often just sounding like some Hollywood airhead rambling on the script, and then having the different characters voice their opinions. The show clearly needed some quality control, some executive who reviewed the script and cut out all the Mary Sue nonsense, where the writers literally erase entire characters so they can go on monologues that don't make sense. The best example of this is the phone call scene, during the conflict between Hank's family and Cristobal. They're supposed to be enemies, both just lost presumably close friends and maybe family, and yet they're talking to each other like they're neighbors trying to settle a property line dispute or something. And later on, when we see the cops listening through the recording of that phone call, one of them mentions that they spent the next 10 minutes off screen talking about self-help books and meditation. This is not funny, it's just nonsense, and it reads as an obvious self-insert from the writers of the show, which you just don't do if you want your show to be taken seriously. Moving on, the whole hitman actor premise died in the water after the first, season and a half of the show, and it seemed like the writers of Barry had no clue what to do with the character. He started off as a depressed veteran who just discovered a new spark for life while maintaining a career as a deadly contract killer. Then suddenly he is a beta male and can't speak up for himself in acting class and has to learn how to be confident even though he was literally a Marine. Then, out of nowhere, he is an abusive boyfriend to Sally and the show is presenting him as this evil person. If the showrunners were attempting to model Breaking Bad and turn a good guy into a villain, they missed by a long shot. The show just feels disjointed, like we're technically watching the same characters the whole time, but they aren't really the same people, and the show we're watching keeps changing every couple episodes. I think the creators of Barry were just too excited about the concept and rushed out a show without really taking much time to explore that concept beforehand. Think about Breaking Bad or Sopranos or any truly great show you've watched. Does it feel like you're just watching a weekly installment? No, because with great shows, there's a lot of world building and careful planning involved. Barry doesn't feel anything like that. It feels like the showrunners just kept trying new ideas until they ran out of juice, just throwing random stuff at the wall and eventually openly using the characters as mouthpieces, and then just deciding to end the show in the most anticlimactic way ever. I actually turned the show off after watching Barry's death scene, and I wasn't even really upset that Barry died, it was just the way that he died. It felt cheap. How do you kill the most deadly hitman in the world?
Oh, wow.
Really? Also, that whole plotline with Detective Janice was just so stupid. Kusino knew her for what, a few days? A week? But then suddenly when she's killed, and for the rest of the series from that point on, he and the rest of the cast act like she was his wife for 40 years. It's a stupid plotline, especially for one with lasting consequences for the entire show that even end in the main character getting killed. I get it, he liked her, but that's all it seemed like to me. Just a crush. If the writers wanted to portray this deep romantic connection between Kusuno and Janice, they should have let it play out longer and had her die at the end of season 3 or something. Moving on to another thing I hate about this show, Fuchs. Why is it that the literal worst character in the entire show gets a happy ending, meanwhile our protagonist practically gets the equivalent of an off-screen death in an anime? The guy was a coward for the entire show, always barking orders at Barry but being too scared to do anything himself. He literally even ordered the murder of a child at one point, and even though that moment ended up being played out for comedy, it still irked me. Not to mention how immediately after, he made Barry go into the store to find nail polish remover, despite the fact that he just got beat up by Ronnie and stabbed by Ronnie's daughter. Fuchs was infuriating, and I honestly expected him to die much earlier on, like season 1 early. But yet again, it seems like the writers just didn't know what to do with him, and just kept benching him until they decided it was time for another Barry vs. Fuchs plotline. I thought the character was finally done for after he was presumably beaten to death in jail, but then out of nowhere he gets out of jail and he's this big mafia boss with all these bodies. I'm just not sold on it. The suspension of disbelief is broken. Now I would like to say that the acting in this show is pretty great. I wouldn't really expect less from a big Hollywood production, but I was still pretty impressed with a few characters. Namely Barry, of course, and Sally, as annoying as her character was. The acting was great, but the soundtrack, however, was not. I talked about this in a previous video, but I'm not impressed when creators just use the most popular songs of the day in their shows. It dates the shows big time, and it kills any possibility of tension or any other emotional response that could be derived by a thoughtful, scene-specific soundtrack. Honestly, nothing about this show really stood out to me, and I would only recommend watching it if you're just looking for some mindless entertainment, because that's what Barry offers. It isn't a deep, thought-provoking series, or one that really puts you on the edge of your seat and keeps your eyes glued to the screen, but it is entertainment, technically. Overall, I'm just not a fan of this show. I went into it thinking it would be like Dexter but with a modern twist, and it was not that. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to see more like it, feel free to subscribe to my channel and leave a comment letting me know what you think of Barry. Thanks for watching and take it easy.